Voice of the Mavericks, award-winning broadcaster, and as knowledgeable about sports as anyone I've known. I put two people in that category. With all due respect to anybody else, Chuck Cooperstein and Norm Hitzges. And Chuck Cooperstein, Coop, joins us on 365 Sports. So I'm watching the post of the Cowboys disaster, Chuck, against the Lions. And yes, we're going to get into yesterday's talk show fever. But I saw your tweet about Jerry and that nobody else in the sports business does what he does, general manager, owner, etc. And I never realized that 2 days later he would trump that type of publicity. What are your thoughts? Let's start with yesterday, though. What are your thoughts about what you heard and what was done on 105.3 The Fan?
I mean, it was sad. Mm-hmm. I guess that's probably the overriding emotion that it's come to this, that it's almost as if Jerry has finally come to the realization that the smoke and mirrors have cleared and the reality has set in, that his ability to sell has been compromised by the way his team has played, and especially the way it's played at home. It's one thing. It'd be one thing if they were 3-3 and they were, especially the games at home were close games, competitive games. Stuff happens at the end of the game, things that have happened to the Cowboys for the last almost 30 years that we talk about that drive fans crazy, but it's still basically about the game. Here it's taken to a different level because the Cowboys simply have not been competitive. They have not been competitive in any of their three losses. And then you look at the games that they've won. I mean, the Browns have proven to be a fraud. They're awful. The Giants and the Steelers, can't move the ball on a high school team, let alone moving on an NFL team. And yet, the Cowboys won those games scoring 20 points. I mean, that kind of tells you where their opponents were. And they're just in a really bad place right now. And I thought that Jerry, he handled it so badly on every imaginable level, not the least of which obviously was trying to suggest that he paid, Sean Sharif, RJ Choppy, and Bobby Belt, which is just not the case. It was a complete falsehood. And why he went there, I don't know.
Chuck, Sean asked him the question, I think, the one that put him over the edge, although he was clearly testy going in, which was about the standard of the Cowboys and that it was supposed to be rings. And that I wonder if it's the realization for him finally, because every time I've ever been to a Jerry press conference, I've ever been to that media scrum, when I hear him talking, sometimes I think, does he think it's 1997 right now and not what year it actually is? Like maybe it has hit him that it's been 30 years, man. 30 years.
Well, it's actually 29 years, but who's counting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, really, what, at this point, what can you say as a member of the media, and what can he say, to try to make fans feel better? He can't. I mean, again, it'd be one thing, his team won 12 games each of the last 3 years, and that should not go unnoticed and should not go unappreciated. It's very, very hard to do. Everybody is part of this rings culture. Frankly, it's something that I've never subscribed to because you as fans are not entitled to championships. You're not entitled to them. You're entitled to have a team that has the ability to compete for them, which this team has had the last 3 years. They certainly don't look like they've had it this year through 6 games. And thus, it was understandable, and it should be understandable to Jerry, why people would ask directly why this has gone the way it has gone. Why did you do what you did in the spring and believe that that was going to allow for a different result than what's taken place so far?
Chuck, in all your years, and you used to do shows all the time, and now, of course, broadcast voice of the Mavericks, Did anyone ever like come at you like that as a general manager or a head coach or anyone?
Bobby Valentine did when the Rangers got off to a 1-10 start in 1987. I was in his office after they had gone to 1-10, or actually it was they were 1-10. They had blown a game in Milwaukee, and that was the first game back in Texas. And I was in the clubhouse after the game, and I asked a question to Bobby, and Tom Grieve was there too, and it didn't go particularly well. But they ultimately respected me, and I respected them. The thing is, I wonder at times, does Jerry really respect the media? Does he really believe that we don't see what we see? And if we are bringing this up for, why does he not then just go directly and say, this is why things are the way they are? And then, allow for it to be pressed. And obviously the greatest example here is the whole Derrick Henry situation. And Derrick Henry could have been had here. Jerry says they didn't have the money to do it. Of course they had the money to do it. All they had to do was make sure that they took care of the people that they needed to take care of in a timely manner. But they didn't do that. And that was by their choice to not do it. And so then you get to a point where you get to the end of the preseason, you haven't done anything, and it becomes a colossal mess. I mean, he could be challenged on these things and has been challenged on these things, but I think the fact that his team was embarrassed as it was at home, the way it was. I mean, look, the only game that I can remember even being close to that type of home embarrassment for the Cowboys was the 44-0 game against the Bears in 1985.
Oh God!
When here they kicked 3 field goals. Okay, there they didn't even score.
No.
Chuck, it's funny you mentioned Bobby Valentine. Smokey, you remember we had an awkward exchange with him one time, and it was in 2013. He had just gotten back into media, and he was the Red Sox manager the year before. And I asked him, I said, well, the Red Sox are here making this deep playoff push. What are your thoughts, having been in that clubhouse, about the rapid turnaround? And I was hoping he would say, like, yeah, there were some things, and, maybe like cop to a little bit of like, creating a chemistry problem there. He got mad that I even asked him about the Red Sox, and it was the ALDS. Like, there were only a few teams playing at the time. So what else were we going to ask him about?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, but I will say Bobby Valentine is one of the most brilliant baseball people I've ever been around in my life. I mean, he really is one of those guys that has forgotten more than you will ever know.
Yeah, and we might see a Subway Series, and the last time and the only time, I guess, was in 2000 when he was with the Mets as the manager. Yep. Chuck, if in fact, I talked to RJ earlier. Oh, I want to share this with you. I asked RJ, I said, did you hear from Galloway? Because, Randy's probably furious that he wasn't a part of this exchange. And RJ, who's going to join us in about an hour, said that Galloway called him up and said it was the golden moment in talk radio, sports talk radio in Dallas. And RJ goes, you had the 3-inch headlines with Jimmy. He goes, no, this was, and I just thought it was cool that Randy reached out to RJ. But where do they go from here? Because I think that he challenged them. He doesn't pay them anything. That's a complete misconception on his part, or maybe his ego.
No, it's a falsehood.
Yeah,
it's a lie.
It's completely wrong. Yeah, they pay the Cowboys. I don't even know if they'll do another segment. Do you think Jerry will back off on this and apologize?
I think it's possible because, Jerry, listen, this, David, haven't been around him that long. And generally speaking, you're around Jerry, you're around him for 10 minutes, you cannot help but like him.
Yep.
You can't. I think the best thing, frankly, is that there is no game this week. Everything's going to calm down, and over a few days, and cooler heads are going to prevail, and we'll get to next week. I know he's got a spot that he does on Fridays on 105.3 as well in the midday. But I think everything will calm down and it'll be back to normal, such as normal can be around the Cowboys. But I mean, I think that if Jerry really tries to put his foot down and say, I'm not talking to those guys anymore. I want to go somewhere else to do it. I mean, that's the fact that he does that in morning drive, which is still the gold standard of radio. To me, that puts tremendous pressure then on the fan and their management, and basically telling Jerry, look, these are our guys. They've done this with you for 14 years. Okay, it's not like these guys are new to the party here. They've done it with you for 14 years. Hey, this is it. And then does Jerry raise the ante? And when we get to the end of the contract, and I have no idea how long their contract is, and just says, well, you know what? If that's the case, well, we're going to find some other place to go. And then what does that mean for Odyssey? I mean, do we really want to go to the nuclear option here? And where I just don't see the necessity for it, and I do think that ultimately cooler heads will prevail.
You want to talk college football?
Yeah, I do. I'm curious, Chuck, your thoughts on Billy Napier right now and his seat. And I mean, obviously, I don't think he's going to be the coach there next year. But where does Florida go from here? They have been a team for the last decade and a half that keeps hitting a ceiling that for a school like them does not exist.
Well, I mean, I think we saw classic Billy on Saturday night against Tennessee. I mean, that was an absolutely winnable game. Tennessee was basically begging Florida to win the game, and Billy just messed it up because that's what he does. He is tremendous as an organizer, and there was so much that needed to be organized in the program when he came in. And they basically gave him an unlimited checkbook, and he exceeded it. But they got that right. But on the sidelines, he is a veritable clock management disaster. I mean, no matter what coach you believe is a really bad or awful clock manager, he does not hold a candle to Billy in that department. And we saw it at the end of the first half. When Florida wound up with a penalty that took a field goal off the board that could have made it 6-0 at the end of the half, and just the way they managed the clock to get to that point, and then the utter chaos late in the game where ultimately they somehow managed to get a touchdown, and 29 seconds to go. You're on the road at against the number 8 team in the country. I am usually from the school of coaches should do no harm. You don't discount points. Points kind of matter, but I would have gone for 2 there against Tennessee on the road. If you went into that game thinking you had one play with 30 seconds to go that could win the game for you, would you do it? Yeah. And of course, they score the touchdown. They're going to go for 2. They run a swinging gate play that they feel like Tennessee had matched, and then they call a timeout and then kick the extra point. I guess that's what made it all the crazier. It's like, call a timeout, go for 2. Just go for 2. Line up and run the play. Run pass option with Lagway, and I mean, who by the way is tremendous, and is going. He might be the one reason Billy stays because Lagway loves him. I don't know what Lagway sees in him, but Lagway loves him. And the last thing this team needs is not only to have to go through yet another coaching change, but to lose a guy that could very well be a truly elite college quarterback. And that's very possible right now. So it's a disaster there. It's not going to be easily fixed. He's got a $26 million buyout. The athletic director has already hired 2 coaches, one of whom, frankly, succeeded until he didn't succeed. Dan Mullen succeeded. And then Dan Mullen decided that he didn't want to coach anymore and stopped coaching that team and stopped running that program. And that led to Billy, coming to the scene. So you have that. You have an athletic director who's already hired 2 coaches. It's rare in the SEC you get to hire a third. However, there is an interim president at the university right now because of a scandal that the prior president basically wound up having to leave. And the interim president is the former president who hired the athletic director, who, by the way, is Scott Strickland, who used to be many years ago the Baylor sports information director.
Small world.
Yep.
Small
That's
world.
exactly right. Yep.
Chuck, you're up there in Dallas where we just saw one of the least, competitive chapters of the Red River Showdown, and 2 programs that are going wildly different directions right now in their first year in the SEC. Texas, #1, and with Georgia this weekend, and Oklahoma. You got fans screaming for midseason coaching changes and this and that. It's just none of it's good. Your thoughts on where those 2 programs find themselves and coming out of Dallas last weekend?
Well, I mean, look, Sark has slowly, carefully built the monster. He has built the monster that, frankly, Texas should be, that the University of Texas should be. They're terrific, and they are the best team in the country that I've seen this year, and frankly, by a lot. In Oklahoma's case, remember 2 years ago, I mean, Oklahoma got beat 49-0. Last year, they beat Texas. And Texas was pretty darn good last year. I mean, it was going to be given their receiver situation where you got 5 or 6 receivers that are out of the lineup, and you got a freshman quarterback who's, pretty uncertain. I guess the bigger story there is, why has Jackson Arnold failed as badly as he failed? Especially when it looked like in the bowl game last year, like there might really be something there, that he was, the 5-star quarterback who was ready to live up to the hype. But how has that fallen off the cliff as quickly as it's fallen off? I don't think Oklahoma's defense is pretty good. And Venables is obviously a very good defensive coach and has been for years. But they've got to get the offense fixed. And frankly, given their quarterbacks, what I've seen of their quarterbacks, I don't know if they're being coached wrong. I don't know if they don't have the talent. But it's a mess, and they'll never be able to score enough points in the SEC given how they are playing right now. So I don't necessarily think it's a long-term thing. Everybody, I don't follow recruiting, in the most granular of ways, but Venables, by all accounts, has recruited well. He's recruited top 10 classes to Oklahoma. So they should be able to have enough on hand to get some stuff done. Now, again, I've heard some things that their NIL situation is not good, that they started late, that they're really playing catch up in that area. And let's face it, guys, this is the world we're living in today, and you got to be able to play that game. And we all know Texas can play that game. Yep. And Texas can play that game better than anybody else if that's what they want to do. And that's why I don't want to say NIL is the total reason why they are where they are, but I do think it certainly helped. Sark has recruited well from the get-go, and he recruited properly too. You look at how he built the program. He knew that when he got to Texas that his interior lines were not nearly good enough, and he spent a lot of those first 2 recruiting classes taking care of that. That, if we're going to play in the SEC, we got to man up. We got to get some big boys in there who can move and, can make things happen. And he's done that. And you look at how they play up front. Is there anyone that's better than they are? I haven't seen it.
No, they've got some dudes. They had the NIL, the transfer portal, and the fact that he just created methodically he kind of gutted all the entitlement or whatever it might have been, and what he's done is frightening if you don't like Texas. There's no doubt. Coop, last thing, I can't let you go without asking you about the Mavericks. Great run last year to the championship series. Your thoughts about maybe expectations for this year?
Well, the expectations are high, and they should be high. I think what they've done in the offseason has made their team a better team. It's made them a deeper team. Having said that, they still need their stars to be able to play. And, Luka has not played in October, and apparently he's not going to play tomorrow night, the final preseason game. But I don't worry too much about that. What I do want to see is just how those 3, Luka, Kyrie Irving, and Klay Thompson, how they play off of each other, at both ends of the floor, what that all means. So, it could very well be, and it's a bit unfortunate because the Mavericks have a very home-heavy schedule to start the season. They play 7 of their first 9 at home. You'd love to be able to hit the ground running and take advantage of all of that. I don't know that they're necessarily going to be able to get off to that type of hot start. And frankly, in the kid era, it's one of those things where, they haven't necessarily started great. Certainly in 22 and 24, that was the case, but they finished great. And, we'll see how that all comes together. But Doncic is certainly MVP worthy. Klay seems to be able, even though, he had that bad night the other night against the Clippers, Luka's coming down the lane and defenses are going to converge on him, and he's going to kick it to the corner, and he's kicking it to Klay Thompson. Okay, he's kicking it to Klay Thompson and not Derek Jones. With all due respect to Derek Jones and what he meant to the team last year, he's kicking it to Klay Thompson. That's the reason the Mavericks did not beat Boston in the playoffs and the finals. They just didn't shoot the ball well enough. Didn't have outside shooting. Well, they got outside shooting with Thompson. They got outside shooting with Quentin Grimes. Why Detroit gave up on him, I don't know, but the Mavericks are certainly thrilled that they did in the Tim Hardaway trade. Najee Marshall shot 38% from 3 last year in New Orleans. Now, was that an outlier? Because he had never shot higher than 33%, I believe, before then. So it looks like he's going to be able to do that. You've got to be able to spread the floor. They can do that. They're not quite as good, defensively. With Thompson in place of Derek Jones. If this was Klay 10 years ago, that'd be a different argument, but that's not what it is now. But the two centers are rim protectors. They're dynamic there. Lively looks to be, even more improved, and he improved by leaps and bounds as the season went on. Gafford's a terrific compliment to him. They're really, really good. They ought to be able to finish in the top 4 at least and get home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs. If it all hits, guys, they could very well be a top 2 team in the West.
Well, they were fun to watch last year. Great mix. Love the trade they made in the middle of the year that gave them the spark, and also what they have coming back. Thanks for your time, man. We could go forever with you. Appreciate your thoughts on the Jerry flare-up and the Cowboys and also college football and the Mavericks. Thank you, buddy.
Appreciate you having me, guys, as always.
Chuck Cooperstein, voice of the Mavericks, as knowledgeable as you'll ever get when it comes to sports. We appreciate him.